A man from Consumer Wireless, the kind of company that sells you a phone plan at the airport, walked into a defense contractor and decided the woman holding 3 Pentagon clearances was a bottleneck. He fired her on Slack. Not in a meeting, not in his office, on Slack. What followed cost his company $90 million and a visit from the federal government. Stay to the end for my take on that Slack message, because it tells you everything. And I can't wait to read yours in the comments. 11 years. That is how long I kept the lights on inside rooms most people did not know existed. My name is Sarah Keene, and I was the Senior Systems Integration Lead and sole designated Facility Security Officer at Ridgepoint Defense Solutions in Fairfax County, Virginia. 400 employees, 3 active special access programs under the Department of Defense. Roughly $90 million a year in contracts that required personnel with compartmented clearances to access secure facilities we called vaults. My days started the same way every morning. Badge authorization queue first. A thermos of black coffee in one hand, the access roster in the other. Every person entering a vault had to be cross-referenced against the DCSA personnel security system, their polygraph status confirmed, their read-on dates current. I maintained those rosters by hand because the automated system Ridgepoint purchased in 2019 could not handle the overlapping compartment structures of our 3 SAPs. So I built a manual reconciliation process, a set of spreadsheets cross-linked to the DCSA database that I updated every Monday and Thursday. It was not elegant. It worked perfectly. Then there were the ITAR compliance filings, International Traffic in Arms Regulations. Section 120.17 defined the technical data boundaries for everything we built. I filed the annual certifications. I managed the technology control plans. When a new engineer joined a program, I drafted the read-on documentation, coordinated their indoctrination briefing, and logged it with the Cognizant Security Agency. I liked the work the way a watchmaker likes the work. Precision mattered. Each filing had teeth. The thing about being an FSO on active special access programs is that the designation is personal. It is not a department. It is not a title you can transfer with a Slack announcement. It is a name. My name sat on 3 separate SAP security plans filed with DCSA. If that name disappeared, DCSA would trigger a mandatory security review. I mentioned this once in a staff meeting the way you mentioned that the fire extinguisher needs an inspection. Routine paperwork, barely worth noting. Someone asked how long the review process took. 4 to 6 months, I said. Nobody wrote it down. Then in March, our CTO, Richard Eames, retired, and Ridgepoint's board decided what the company needed was commercial innovation. Derek Langham arrived in April with a handshake that lasted 2 seconds too long and a vocabulary that sounded like someone had fed a business school textbook into a blender. He came from Goldbridge Telecom, Consumer Wireless. He had never held a security clearance. He had never worked in defense. The board hired him because he had tripled Goldbridge's subscriber count in 18 months. And someone on the compensation committee said the phrase, fresh perspective on stale processes. His first all-hands meeting, he stood at the front of the conference room in a slim-fit navy suit with no tie, already a signal in a building where half the workforce wore lanyards that said top secret, and told us Ridgepoint was going to move at startup speed. He wanted to flatten the hierarchy. He said our internal communications were siloed to the point of organizational paralysis, and that he was bringing in cross-functional transparency. I sat in the third row and translated. Flatten the hierarchy meant he did not understand why certain people had access to certain rooms. Cross-functional transparency meant he wanted to open doors that were closed for reasons outlined in federal law. His first week, he sent a company-wide Slack message. He had migrated us from our secure internal system to Slack within 72 hours, a decision that made my stomach drop, announcing that his former Princeton roommate, Cole Whitfield, would be joining Esley's VP of Integrated Operations. Cole had no clearance, no defense background, 6 years at a fitness app startup. The second week, Derek called me into his office. Sarah, I have been going through the org structure, and I want to talk about your bandwidth, he said. My bandwidth. Your role touches too many verticals. FSO, systems integration, compliance. It is creating a bottleneck. I want to open source the communications architecture so Cole can build cross-functional transparency across programs. I looked at him for 3 full seconds. If you open the communications architecture across programs, you will violate ITAR, Section 120.17, and compromise 3 active SAP compartments. Individuals without appropriate clearance and need to know cannot access compartmented information. That is not a policy. That is Title 18, Section 798. He smiled the way people smile when they have already stopped listening. I appreciate the institutional perspective, Sarah, but we need to move past gatekeeping and into a growth-oriented security posture. A growth-oriented security posture. I wrote that down in my notebook after the meeting. I underlined it twice. Not because it was important, because I wanted to remember the exact moment I knew. It came on a Tuesday. Not in his office, not in a meeting. On Slack. I was refilling my coffee in the break room when a junior analyst named Marcus walked over with his phone screen facing me. Did you see this? His voice was careful, the way people speak when they're handing you something sharp. Derek had posted in the general channel, excited to announce we are transitioning to fresh leadership in systems integration and security operations. Cole Whitfield will be taking point on streamlining our compliance framework to align with our new agile defense model. I want to thank those who built the legacy infrastructure for their years of service. He had not tagged me. He had not called me. He had announced my replacement to 400 people while I was pouring half and half into a ceramic mug with the Ridgepoint logo on it. 20 minutes later, HR called me to a conference room. Janet, who I had helped get her daughter an internship 2 summers ago, read from a script about organizational restructuring and role consolidation. She could not meet my eyes. I understand, I said. I smiled. Not a brave smile, a real one. Because I had been doing the math since Derek's second week, and the math was very, very clear. I asked for 1 hour to collect my personal items. Janet nodded, relieved that I was not making a scene. I went to my desk. I saved my personal contacts to my phone. I took the frame photo of my daughter at her Georgetown graduation. I opened my filing cabinet and remove 3 folders marked personal reference, copies of every certification, every commendation letter, every training record. All mine. Nothing proprietary. Then I walked to the lobby, badge on the counter. Dale, the security guard I had known for 9 years, looked at me like someone had died. I shook his hand. The parking lot was warm for April. I sat in my car with the engine off for 2 minutes. I allowed myself that. 2 minutes with the weight of 11 years pressing on my sternum. Then I started the engine. The Slack notification had already gone silent on my phone. Derek Langham had removed my account. She just walked out of a building where she was the only person legally authorized to keep 3 Pentagon programs running. And the man who fired her on Slack handed that job to a guy from a fitness app. Hit subscribe. We are just getting started. The first call came 9 days later. Marcus, the junior analyst, whispering from his car in the parking garage. DCSA sent a notification. They are asking about your FSO status on the SAP security plans. Derek told Cole to handle it, and Cole asked what DCSA stands for. I was in my kitchen, making lentil soup. The windows were open, and I could hear the neighbors' wind chimes. I am sorry to hear that, Marcus. I hope they figure it out. They did not figure it out. What happened next unfolded like a controlled demolition, observed from a safe distance. Former colleagues told me pieces. I inferred the rest from public filings and contacts in Northern Virginia's defense circuit. Week 2 after my departure, DCSA formally notified Ridgepoint that their FSO of record was no longer employed. The company had a limited window to designate a qualified replacement. Derek assigned Cole, who did not hold a security clearance of any kind, to manage the transition. DCSA responded by initiating a preliminary inquiry. Week 4, DCSA investigators discovered that Cole had accessed the vault anteroom. Not the vault itself, but the controlled corridor leading to it, using a temporary badge that should never have been issued to an uncleared individual. This was not espionage. It was ignorance. Derek had told him to familiarize himself with all operational spaces. That single sentence, delivered in vapor by a man who did not understand what a controlled space meant, triggered a formal security violation report. I was hiking Shenandoah that weekend, Old Rag Mountain, 7 miles up and 7 miles back, and at the summit I sat on the rocks and ate a sandwich and did not check my phone for 4 hours. Week 6, DCSA suspended Ridgepoint's facility, clearance pending full review. All 3 SAP programs entered mandatory hold. $90 million in active contracts frozen. The Pentagon program offices began issuing cure notices, which in defense contracting is the bureaucratic equivalent of fix this or we are leaving. The near miss came during week 5. Patricia, who had worked in my department for 7 years, almost called me. She told me later she had my number pulled up on her phone. She knew the FSO transition paperwork. She had watched me do it dozens of times. She was going to ask one question. Which DCSA office handled the SAP security plan amendments? That one answer might have bought them enough time to avoid the suspension. But before she could dial, Derek pulled her into an emergency meeting about rebranding the security narrative for stakeholder confidence. 3 hours listening to Cole present slides about agile compliance ecosystems. By the time it ended, DCSA had already filed the suspension notice. Patricia called me that night, not to ask the question, to tell me she had updated her resume. The call from DCSA came on a Thursday morning in June, not from Ridgepoint, from the government. Director Annette Osei from DCSA Industrial Security asked if I would be available for consulting engagement. They needed a subject matter expert to assist with the security review of a defense contractor whose facility clearance had been suspended. She named the company. I put on a charcoal blazer I had bought 3 weeks earlier, not because I knew this call was coming, because I had started consulting for 2 defense startups, and I needed clothes that matched the rate I was charging, which was 4 times my old salary. The review was held at Ridgepoint's facility. I walked through the lobby where Dale, the security guard, still worked. He saw me and his eyes went wide, then soft. I was wearing a DCSA contractor badge now. Different lanyard, different authority entirely. The conference room held 9 people, 4 from DCSA, 3 from Ridgepoint's legal team, Derek Langham, Cole Whitfield, and me, seated on the government side of the table. Derek's face when I sat down, I will remember it with clinical precision, not shock, recognition. The slow arithmetic of a man realizing the person he dismissed on Slack now held the pen that would write the findings report on his company. Director Osei asked me to walk the room through FSO transition requirements for special access programs. I did, in steel, every regulation number, every timeline. I explained that the FSO designation on a SAP security plan is a named individual whose clearance is personally adjudicated by DCSA. You cannot hand it to someone without a clearance the way you hand someone a Slack channel. Then came the reframe. During my review of the subpoenaed access logs, I found that Cole had not just accessed the anteroom once. He had badged into controlled spaces on 14 separate occasions over 3 weeks. On 4 of those occasions, he was accompanied by an external consultant from Goldbridge Telecom. 0 clearance, never logged in the visitor system. This was not a procedural oversight. This was unauthorized access to spaces governed by federal security directives. The review I had described as routine paperwork in that staff meeting, the one nobody wrote down, was the mechanism that prevented exactly this. Derek attempted to speak. We were in the process of operationalizing a transition framework. Mr. Langham, Director Osei said, we are not here for frameworks. Cole stared at the table. Derek's jaw worked silently, the way a machine works when a gear has stripped and the motor does not know it yet. DCSA's final report cited 17 security violations across a 6-week period. Ridgepoint was placed on 12-month probationary status. 2 of the 3 SAP contracts were reassigned to competing firms. The 3rd was renegotiated at a 40% reduction. Derek Langham was terminated by the board in August. His name was entered into the DCSA security violation database. In the defense industry, that is a professional death certificate. No cleared facility will hire a person flagged for unauthorized access on their watch. Last I heard, he was consulting for a commercial real estate firm in Charlotte. Cole Whitfield left in July. He is back in fitness tech. Patricia, Marcus, and 4 others now work at the defense startups I consult for. We rebuilt what we know how to build. Secure systems run by people who understand that the language matters because the language is the law. Ridgepoint survived, barely. They hired a new FSO named Diana who called me once to ask about my manual reconciliation process. I walked her through every spreadsheet. 2 hours, I did not charge for it. Some people have asked why I helped. Why give them anything after what they did? I did not do it for Ridgepoint. I did it because Diana asked in steel, and I answer people who speak my language. So here's my question. Should Sarah have helped Diana at the end? 2 hours walking her through every spreadsheet, no charge, and they fired her on Slack. Some of you are going to say that is grace. Some of you are going to say that's giving them something they didn't earn. Drop your take in the comments because I know this one's going to split this room. And if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do. You know you're going to want to see the next one. Now, here is my take. Derek called a federal security designation a bottleneck. Let that sit for a second. The thing standing between his company and 3 active Pentagon programs. The thing that kept uncleared people out of classified rooms, and he looked at it and saw a speed bump. That's not arrogance, that's something worse. That's a man who was so comfortable being the smartest person at his last job that he never considered he might be the dumbest person at this one. And the Slack message, firing someone on Slack, not even a direct message. The general channel, he announced it the way you would announce a new coffee machine in the break room. He thought what Sarah did was administrative. He thought compliance was paperwork. He thought the woman keeping the federal government out of his lobby was slowing him down. She was not slowing him down. She was the only reason they were allowed to operate. Pentagon contracts, $90 million, a permanent flag next to his name, in a government database, all because he could not tell the difference between a process that was protecting him and a person who was in his way. They were the same thing, and he never figured that out.